Hello and welcome to the Unnamed Automotive Podcast. My name is Sami Haj Assad, and with me, as always, is my good friend and fellow automotive journalist, Benjamin Hunting. Say hi to the people, Ben.
Greetings, listeners.
Greetings to everyone. If this is the first time you're listening to our podcast, thank you for trying something new. I will reiterate, Ben and I are a pair of automotive journalists, but more than that, we're very good friends. We've been doing this for 400 episodes now, Ben.
This is episode number 400. I can confirm that fact from your last sentence.
That is a lot of episodes, only for us to discover that we're probably just only being listened to by ghosts and or robots, right?
That's not true. We have a devoted group of loyal listeners, and I will not have you besmirching their honor like you just did. Honestly,
I'm just kidding. I'm
pretty shocked. Well, it wasn't funny.
Oh, okay.
Just to kind of recap the whole 400 episodes thing, I had originally planned to do a spreadsheet that would talk about every car that we'd ever driven on the show and talked about on the show. And I decided to do that. I was like, I'll do that, the afternoon before we record, not realizing that we've driven conservatively way too many cars. This goes back to 2016. In October of 2016 is when we first started doing the show. So we're in our ninth year of doing this.
Jeez. And
roughly 50 episodes a year, until Sammy's family obligations began to interfere with recording.
Interfere?
No, I mean, mostly it was travel that would stop us from doing an episode here and there. So, you got to figure, Sammy, how many episodes a year? 45 on average, something like that?
At least. Yeah, 45. 40 is a good one. 40 is a good number.
And then, I think it's more than 40, but okay. Once you start also figuring the fact that for a while we were traveling all the time, which meant that we would have more than just two cars to talk about during the week, because we'd be at an event, we'd have a vehicle that we drove at home, and at the event there would sometimes be multiple vehicles, especially if it was like a line drive setup where the automaker brings a whole bunch of models and you get to move from one to the other. So all this to say, I was like, it'll be really cool, and I'll make up a database that'll have all of our vehicles, and it'll we can consult it and see not just how many we've driven, but how many of which brand and how many of which model and how many times we've repeated vehicles. So I got started on it.
This is an awful idea. Well, there's two of us to talk about at least two cars about each episode. So how far did you get?
Almost 9 years. So I got through the first year and then a little bit more.
And how many cars is that?
130. And that's not even, I don't even think that's accurate, because in the early days, my labeling of the episode names was not at what it is today. So sometimes I would just have a general topic about an automaker, and I wasn't sure the specific models we talked about. So I had to kind of fudge it. So I think that number might be conservative. That means I think in the show we've talked about and driven well over 1,000 cars.
Is that normal, do you think?
I don't think anything about this our show is normal.
I don't think that's normal at all. So you were expecting us in an episode to talk about 1,000 cars and expect people to listen to that?
No, I think we would just talk about general trends, like the fact that you drove the Supra conservatively a dozen times in a year.
Yeah, I mean, if you took out the Supra, it would probably be 700 cars?
Yeah, it would probably be much lower, maybe 600 cars.
Or you and I don't know how many versions of a Jeep Wrangler you've driven, but probably another 400 of those. That's a lot of episodes, man. And I gotta say, I love our listeners. I think we have some of the best listeners. Listen, what me and Ben do, we get a lot of comments and feedbacks on some of the stories that we write. And I'm on YouTube as well. And nothing makes me feel better than hearing from the listeners from our podcast who are uber supportive. They give great feedback. They're really knowledgeable, and I love them. I think they give great ideas, and I love talking about our listeners. I love talking with our listeners. I think we've got some of the coolest listeners and some of the coolest enthusiasts that I've ever worked with.
And one thing else I wanted to point out is, in terms of actual numbers of episodes, it's more than 400 because we never count the bonus episodes. I think there's 7 or 8 bonus episodes now. And a lot of that is because people didn't seem to like them. I know there are fervent supporters of the bonus episodes in the audience,
Yeah.
and I appreciate them because I thought they were fun. But for the most part, except for the one-offs that we did when we were at an event or an auto show or something like that,
Right.
the ones that focus on like movie cars and that kind of thing, Star Car Face Off, again, something that was a lot of fun that everybody hated. those don't get counted in the number. They were also probably shorter, like 20 minutes usually, so
Yeah.
those aren't really included. So.
My favorite is that I realized after 9 years of doing this is that people come to the show for consumer information, like consumer related information, like cars that are on the market today, which are good or bad or better than the old ones. And then we have like some enthusiasts who want to know what it's like with old cars and fun cars and what it's like to drive them at speed on track. And there's nothing else like that. Nobody wants to know what's going on. Especially in popular culture.
There are people, I'm sure, who listen to see if our friendship endures.
Oh, yeah, that's true. I know that. I know that there's people who they probably have like a pool on what episode it'll be when we finally snap on each other.
So
I don't know.
I added up the amount of time that we've spent on the air, and it comes out to 16 and a half days of solid podcasts. So like that's how long it would take if you were to line them up back to back and listen to them. I don't know how long a road trip 16 days would take you. Like, I think you could probably drive from Alaska to the bottom of Argentina, like right where the ocean meets the Antarctic Ocean during that period. Do you think that's safe to say?
What? In 16 days of straight driving?
Yeah,
you would
straight
crash
driving.
into something.
You have a partner, you tag team it.
Okay.
But you have to reap the episodes because like you can't miss them when you're sleeping. And that doesn't include like the hour to 2 hours of preamble that Sammy and I also record. So like Sammy and I have probably spent 30 to 38 days
Talking
on
to
mic.
each other. Yeah, straight talking to
conversing over the last 9 years. And that doesn't include like in-person stuff and like our chats online. So yeah, it's a strong bond, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
And here's to another 16 days worth of talking to each other in the future. I don't think we don't have any plans of stopping or slowing down, but
no, in fact, I mean, if it's like that X-Files episode where if we stop doing it, a chip in our brain just like shorts out and we're done.
That's an X-Files episode?
There's an X-Files episode starring Bryan Cranston where he has to keep driving west. And if he stops driving west, there's like this pain in his skull and eventually his skull explodes. And
why have we never talked about this driving-oriented X-Files show until right now?
And I think
think you're making this up.
No, from what I remember, he takes Mulder hostage. I don't remember why. And then Mulder eventually figures out what's going on. But he doesn't have a cure. Like, eventually, the thing about going west is
Hold on, wait a minute. Mulder somehow figures out that the man has a chip in his brain that tells him to go west.
Yeah, that's the premise of the show, is that Mulder is smart.
But how does one, even how smart somebody is, jumping to a conclusion about a chip in a brain? That's
it might not be a chip. It was something in his brain.
Something in a brain.
Yeah.
Without using, medical tools.
Sammy.
That's the first time you're gonna call me Sam.
No, I said Sam. I said Sam, and then I hiccuped, so like it didn't come out. Sammy, the brain is mysterious. We don't,
but it's in there, and if there's a chip in there telling you to go to west,
I mean, it's hopefully it's in there. So what are we going to talk about today? Now that we've gotten, we've talked about memories and 400 episodes, and yeah, I remember.
Yeah, tell me your memories. You're saying memories. Tell me.
Episode, I did a supercut of you doing the intro of the show.
50th.
Yeah, and I considered it was with your hello and welcome, and I considered doing that for this show. But 400 hello and welcomes would seem to test the goodwill of even the most devoted listener.
It would also test your ability, I think. I'm telling you, 400 episodes is nothing to sift through. Like, that's a lot.
Yeah, 16 days.
Yeah. My favorite episodes are when we could record them in person, or when we would do like updates from when we were at like auto shows together or an event together, and we would just hang out in a hotel room chatting. I used to love those. Those were the most fun.
My favorite episodes are when we get really goofy, or when I'm feeling sad and then we have an episode and then I feel better at the end.
That happens every week, though.
Well, I don't always feel sad, Sammy. I mean,
you kind of do.
Wow, that's depressing.
See, that's what I'm talking about. What are we talking about, Ben, this week? I've got a luxury SUV that we haven't talked about in
luxury or premium.
Oh God, here we go again. High-end SUV that we haven't talked about in what I understand to be 6 years. That is a long time for a car to evade our podcast.
I can't even think of another vehicle that we haven't driven in 6 years. Maybe the GTR.
Okay, maybe.
That might be up there. I haven't driven... No, the R8?
I've driven an R8 during our podcast years.
No, I know, but in the last 6 years.
I'm not sure. Yeah, you're right. This is the 2025 Acura RDX. And it's important to talk about the RDX, especially today, because Acura has made a little bit of a comeback lately with a few of its vehicles that have gained critical support, namely the Integra, and from what I'm reading, there's a new car that has just been released recently called the ADX, which seems to be like a crossover version of the Integra or a high-end version of the Honda HR-V, which is an awful place to start.
Yeah, I feel like that latter, a high-end HR-V that feels like a curse. That's like someone shows up at your house and says, "You will pay more," and then you end up with a vehicle that's objectively not something you want to drive.
But it was important to talk about, it was important for me to revisit the RDX because I actually think the RDX has more positives than it has negatives. However, the negatives outweigh those positives in such a way that makes it so difficult for this vehicle to stand out in its class. So namely, we're talking about, if you want to stick to the premium brand, I think we're going to be comparing it to something like the Lincoln Corsair or maybe even the Buick Envision. And then other high-end vehicles might include the Infiniti QX50, although I think they're eventually going to phase that out sometime in the near future.
What about the Lexus NX?
Lexus NX is a really good competitor for this, and I'll point out why I think the Acura has a few things above it, and why the Lexus is probably a more successful product altogether, though. And then there's the usual European alternatives, which would be the
Audi Q3,
Audi Q5, and X3, and BMW X3 and Mercedes GLC. No, I'm talking about RDX, not ADX. Okay. ADX would go up against the Q3 for sure, and BMW X1. And then, of course, I think we used to be pretty high on the Genesis GV70.
Yes.
Listen, there's a lot of really, really, really good cars in that lineup of vehicles, and I haven't even mentioned the Porsche Macan, which is overpriced and very good, but very expensive.
Are you telling me that an RDX is price comparable to an X3 and a GV70?
Yes, I am telling you that.
That feels like a mistake on Acura's part.
GV70 is about $1,000 more expensive than an RDX.
Okay.
And the X3 is closer to $5,000 more expensive than an RDX. Okay?
And I'm willing to bet that the RDX has a single engine choice. Is that correct?
That is right. The Acura has one engine choice, and this is exactly where I want to start. The powertrain in the Acura RDX does not get enough attention. It is a 2-liter 4-cylinder turbocharged engine that makes, I believe, I'm going to double check with this horsepower figure, but it's 272 horsepower, which doesn't sound like a lot, but there's something about the way this car delivers that power.
Don't say gearing.
It is 100% gearing because there's a 10-speed automatic transmission, and those early gears are really good. Like the throttle is really responsive too, and I found this to be really good feeling right off the line. It makes the car feel really lively in a way that you no longer expect from modern SUVs, and I was really happy with that. And then it cruises fairly decently on the highway. The 10-speed auto obviously sinks into that 10th gear and then just chills out on the highway. And I mean, it's fine. I didn't find it to be as quiet as I was hoping it could be, but we did encounter a lot of inclement weather during my testing, and it's particularly when I was driving on the highway, so a lot of rain, even some, what is it called?
Sleet?
Freezing rain or sleet, which is awful to drive in and does not give a really good impression of audio levels in the car.
Now, I want to point out that almost all of the vehicles you mentioned as competitors have a more powerful version as well.
That's a great point.
Like they all start in the Turbo 4 area, as far as I know.
Yep.
But you can usually get a Turbo 6.
It's also worth pointing out that Acura as a brand has offered a level up powertrain in several of its vehicles, particularly the Integra, which is really highly acclaimed with its Type S model. The TLX Type S exists, as well as the MDX Type S. And all of these are moderate improvements in terms of powertrain. The RDX does not have a optional powertrain, which is weird because, again, this generation of the RDX came out in 2019. There was a refresh in 2022, which we all probably forgot about because there was a pandemic going on. And the engine is loosely related to the Civic Type R's motor, in which it's it is the same engine code, I suppose. And those things make over 300 horsepower in some applications, right?
I think that perhaps the reason why there's no step up for the RDX is that if it were to offer that option, it would probably push it into a price point where it is very much no longer competitive. Now, I haven't been in one in a long time, as we've discovered by looking through the archives, but I think in terms of interior features and driving dynamics, quote unquote, a high performance RDX would probably fall down compared to a BMW or a Genesis or even a Mercedes.
There's only one way to know, I mean, really. But in reality, I'm impressed with the powertrain. I think, for what it offers is pretty good. I used to really like the 4-cylinder motor in the Mercedes, and then I fell in love with the 4-cylinder motor in the BMW. And the Genesis 4-cylinder turbo is also pretty good. So to me it's in good company there.
It kind of feels like Acura knows its role. I guess that's what I was saying. It's like, this is the RDX, and the RDX
is a fallback.
Or the RDX is like for people who have this much money to spend. Mm-hmm. And, there's perhaps a psychological aspect where you go into the dealership. And we talked last week about when you buy vehicles that have X'd out buttons because you didn't buy those features.
Right.
Porsche is a huge example of that. If you go to a dealership, and Acura only has like the one version of the RDX engine wise. Yeah. Like they have a few trims, but it's still just the one version. When you buy that, you don't go home thinking, I'm a sucker, I didn't buy the best one, Right. Whereas if you buy a base X3 and there's like literally $15,000 worth of options or trim levels above you, you might have a different feeling of your place in the hierarchy. So I don't know if Acura is playing that psychology card.
Well, there's also the point that, BMW and Mercedes offer M vehicles and AMG vehicles that are like super high performance.
A step above, right?
Exactly. And Acura won't even play in that level because as a luxury crossover, that's not totally a justifiable position, I think.
I mean, also, as one of our listeners pointed out to me last week, or the week before, sorry, Honda doesn't make performance vehicles anymore. They make like one or two.
And Type R, and that's about it, right?
And the Integra as well.
Yeah.
And do they still make the NSX? I don't know.
I don't think so.
But there's really nothing else.
Yeah.
They're just not interested. And it's crazy because this is a company that you look at we've talked about, I'll just briefly summarize it because it's something we've discussed in the past. But if you look at like the late 80s and early 90s, there were so many like hot performance hatchbacks and compacts available from Honda. You had like the CRX and the Del Sol and the Prelude and the Civic and like just all sorts of stuff that was fun to drive. And then they just got rid of all of that, And I understand part of that is because no one builds affordable cars anymore, but Honda didn't push any of that upmarket.
Yeah. It's also insane to me that as a performance, as an automaker that is involved in Formula One.
Yeah.
Currently involved in Formula One, as far as I understand, is not hanging out there, right? They're supposed to be delivering powertrains to Aston Martin next year, and I don't know how that can be. And I believe they're in with Red Bull for their powertrains as well. And the only example of seeing that in action is a Civic Type R, which is a great car, but
it's for a very specific demographic. Like there's nowhere to go. You buy a Type R, you get a family. What do? You're still in your Type R.
Yeah.
I'm not saying you buy Type R and that gets you a family. Like, I'm not saying like it's like a family lure of some kind, but I just mean there's no more larger option once you're a family person. There's not even like a coupe. They don't make a single coupe, do they?
I don't think so. No.
There's no coupe Civic anymore, right? So,
oh no, it's coming out. It's called the Prelude.
Okay, so that's going to be that. That would be great if Honda makes another performance car. I'm there for it. But it's
just a Civic coupe.
But maybe there'll be an SI, Prelude SI.
Okay.
You know, I mean, what's the last time Honda had a really interesting car to drive that wasn't the Civic? It's probably the S2K, right?
Yeah, I could go and say CRZ, but
I don't think the CRZ was interesting to drive. I think
it was interesting. It was a hybrid with a manual.
I mean, it's intellectually interesting, but does it satisfy the senses? Probably not. Like, yeah. I would like to drive one, but I don't think you could like make a case. I mean, it was a class of one, right? Like,
yeah, exactly. Oops.
And again, that's an interesting concept that I think Honda just left to rot on the vine. Like, yeah, come at us with this CRZ. Ooh, that's interesting. It looks kind of cool. Oh, manual and a hybrid. What's your next step? Our next step is we're going to cancel it after like 4 years of apathy. You know, it's not like we're going to make an SI version or we're going to take the hybrid out and make a crazy version if you want to pay a little bit extra money. It's like what Hyundai is doing now, where
every car that has the potential to be a performance product.
Like there's an N version or there's an N line version that kind of kicks ass. Like the Sonata has an N line version, doesn't it?
Yep. Yeah. And
it's pretty cool. It's like it's the version of the Sonata that I would buy, and it's a mid-sized family sedan. You know, like they didn't go full N, but they almost went there. And then you have even their electric vehicles are getting performance models. So like, where's that spirit at Honda? Like, why not? You know, Honda has the engineering chops to make this happen, and they're just choosing not to.
Well, I mean, let's get back to the Acura brand, which isn't necessarily associated with performance, and that luxury cars or premium brands can either go two ways. They can either go with that responsiveness and that performance element, making you feel like you're getting a lot of car for the money in terms of performance and feel, or they can give you a fancier interior and an isolated drive and lots of technology. And of course, these are some of the areas where the RDX just feels a little less competitive than some of the other products that it competes against.
I think I think that Acura used to be, or at least considered itself, performance oriented. I think when it had the NSX and it had the multiple Type S models for sedans and for the RSX and whatnot and the Integra.
Are you talking like early 2000s?
I'm talking like late 90s to probably like 2012. I think that they tried to make, because if you look at the market, how did Acura differentiate itself from Lexus? How did it differentiate itself from Infiniti? Like there had to be something, right? And then I think that went away, and now there's no differentiation. And like you said, if you're not going to do performance, you got to do something else. And they didn't do something else, or they didn't do it at the level they needed to.
Well, I mean, we always think that they always try to push that, their design is really carefully crafted, their interiors are really, smart, but everyone else is saying the same thing, right?
Yeah, it's like when Volvo pivoted from safety to design because they realized
they lost their identity in a way.
I don't agree. I think that Volvo looked around and realized that every other car had all the same safety features they had pioneered at this point. And when I talked to that Volvo engineer last month about the heartbeat sensor thing, one of the quotes that he gave me was that Volvo's totally cool with other companies copying what they do. They're like, if we are the only ones to do something like the heartbeat sensor and no one else does it, that's fine. We're okay with that. But if like we come up with a technology that's a safety technology and everyone else copies it, we're happy to be pioneers. Like they're happy to go there first and then have all other cars become safe as well. And I think Volvo looked around and said, everyone has adaptive cruise. Everyone has automatic braking. We need to be something other than the safety brand now because technology has become so democratized. It's really easy to just put it in any car. So they turned to design, and their vehicles are much more interesting to look at for the general public who wasn't, totally into the square thing that they had stayed with for so long. And the interiors have really taken a step up too. So
the interiors are different. I think that's one of the coolest, the minimalist and different. And whenever you get into a Volvo, you know that's a Volvo, right?
Yeah.
So that's what I'm trying to get at with Acura, which is that their exteriors are slightly recognizable compared to other luxury brands, and their interiors as well, not super recognizable, but unique in a way, in their own way, that has both positives and negatives. I had the Acura RDX A-Spec Platinum model, which is the interior is just covered in this bright red leather that is at first really eye-searing. I used to get really
vertigo?
Not just vertigo. I would really get like uncomfortable looking at bright red interiors. I think BMW used to have a lot of bright red interiors as well when I first started in this industry, and I think you're seeing fewer of them, or at least maybe a different shade of red, because this is this is a lot. It's very noticeable. It gives a really strong first impression, but I think the more you look at it, you kind of think this is a bit juvenile.
You're more of a mauve kind of guy, right? You want like a mauve interior.
Yeah, of course. Or, burgundy.
Avocado.
And then there's a mishmash of controls in the actually, let me get back to the materials. The materials are actually fairly nice. Steering wheel is nice and chunky. It feels really like BMW M-esque in how it's, nice to hold. The main issue I have with the Acura is that switchgear can feel a little mushy, a little over the top. There's a lot of buttons. There's a lot of buttons on the steering wheel.
How many screens?
There are just, I think, just 2 screens, really, not including a head-up display. So maybe 3.
It's not like it doesn't have the stacked screens on the center anymore.
No, it has one large 10-inch screen, which I'm told is a touchscreen, but does not operate as a touchscreen whenever I need it to.
Nice.
It is operated through a touchpad. Yeah, I mean, I read it in a press release that this is a touchscreen, and I'm like, no, it's not.
A touchpad is the worst interface for any modern car, right?
Yeah, but imagine if the screen is divided into 2 screens.
Okay.
And you therefore have 2 touchpads.
Wait, what?
Yeah, there are 2 touchpads. One is like a square shape, and then off to the side of it, that would complete a rectangle if the 2 were together, is a vertical, basically like a scroll touchpad.
Does it ask you a skill testing question every time you try to do something on the infotainment?
Skill test? Yeah, that would be the only way to make it even more convoluted. And I will point out that I'm an avid user of Android Auto. I really prefer using Android Auto in a lot of the vehicles. I like to basically mess around with the what is it called, native infotainment system, just to get a feel for what the design language is for that, and then basically go into my workflow or my usability workflow in the car by using Android Auto. Android Auto is not an infotainment system that is designed to be used with a touchpad in any way or form. Yeah. It is cumbersome to do so. It is not easy to do a lot of basic things.
No car should ever have a touchpad. I mean, the Lexus LC is the closest we have to a perfect modern coupe, and it's ruined by its infotainment system. And they eventually got rid of it in like the very latest models. But there's a good slate of years of people who are going to be buying these used LCs and having to, grit their teeth and deal with this terrible infotainment system as a result.
Yeah. And the other element, of course, that the RDX has that has yet to be bullied out of an Acura product is that it has a dynamic or basically a driver mode selector in the center of the center of the dash that is a rotary knob that is probably the largest item on the dash, just for changing the drive mode from snow, sport, normal, or custom.
Something you'll do maximum one time every time you drive.
A year, yeah.
And it's not. I mean, changing drive modes is so specific to your circumstances versus, say, a volume control that you will use constantly, or a transmission shifter which you will use every time you drive.
Yeah, and the transmission. I mean, the gear selector is also a bit weird. It's like a variety of different shaped buttons. Some you push and some you pull.
Nice.
It is like playing Bop It with your car sometimes.
What I like about a shifter is if it can introduce an element of uncertainty into the drive.
Yeah.
Like, am I in drive? Am I in reverse? Is this park? These are all questions that are terrifying and make me feel alive.
Yeah. So these are all things that make the Acura RDX much less desirable than its competition. It is cumbersome to drive because of these elements, which is too bad, because if these things were smoothed out and sorted out, two things might happen. One,
just two.
One, the Acura RDX may then become a completely forgettable car in a group of other very similar SUVs,
Womp womp.
or it might become a solid competitor to these other cars in their base trim. Because
so it's basically it either succeeds or it fails.
Yeah, the fact that it has these problems make it worth talking about, I suppose. But I just didn't fall for them. I didn't like them. I think these are issues because the rest of the car is really well sorted. It's got every usability feature I think that's worth having in a modern car, including heated seats, heated steering wheel, ventilated seats, a head-up display with tons of information and customizability, an easy way to adjust the head-up display, which I really appreciated, just a basic rocker on the on a button cluster by your left knee, and even other usability functions. I think I talked about the Mustang Mach-E that I had difficulty finding a way to open the trunk from inside the car. Didn't have that problem with this car. It has an easy button to use. And the trunk space is fairly accommodating as well. And I've got a rear-facing car seat that will not impact my front passenger's seat space.
But all of that, and you're still not going to recommend this vehicle.
Yeah, because of the usability of it, primarily. I think that is my biggest detriment to it. I mean, you have to live with this car. And I don't know if it's just that, a week of testing isn't enough for me to become accustomed to these quote unquote quirks of
long enough
driving
to
the
forget
car.
that other cars exist that are better.
That's true, and that's the other element, of course. And otherwise, I'm really happy with these other elements. I think technically the car is actually really good, but technologically and usability wise, it has room for improvement. It has way more room for improvement. I'm also going to point out that a hands-free driving technology or hands-free feature should start to become way more commonplace in luxury vehicles.
What do you mean should?
We have like Blue Cruise for Ford and Lincoln products. We have Super Cruise for GM, which is Cadillac and Buick products.
And
we
GMC.
have and GMC, yes. We have Pro Pilot Assist. We have all sorts of really good, effective advanced driver assistance features, and I felt like the setup in the Acura was nowhere near as smooth, as comfortable, and as confidence inspiring as some of those other ones. And I think this
possibly because this vehicle's at the end of its life cycle.
Yeah, as we mentioned, the last time we talked about it was when it was introduced, which was 2019, and then it was refreshed in 2020. So we're well beyond both of those dates. This could be the end of it for sure. And they just are not introducing these features. But, yeah, I mean, it's even funnier to me is that Acura is not... Honda and Acura, as much as we discussed, some of their shortfalls or shortcomings, they're not a blind company. As we know, they work with other automakers, especially General Motors with the Honda Prologue and the Acura ZDX. ZDX comes with a hands-free driving technology, cribbed from... It is essentially Super Cruise. They know what is out there, what their competitors are offering. They have it in their own showroom. And they need to start picking up the slack and realizing what they're up against and how to improve upon and compete with other automakers, right?
Sure. I mean, but I think it's just less a question of apathy and more a question of they're not going to do that on a vehicle that's likely on its way out. Like fitting the sensors and that kind of thing, it's an investment to make. And if you're only going to sell it for another couple of years, you probably don't want to put those costs down because you won't recoup them.
Speaking of costs, the starting price of the RDX is $46,000. It tops out at $56,000. That's in the US. In Canada, those prices go up by about $10,000 on both ends of the spectrum. There's only 3 trims for the Canadians. It's the base model is about $57,000, while the top trim, the Platinum Elite A spec, which I drove, is closer to $67,000.
Every time I hear A spec, I think Gran Turismo.
Yeah, I think that's a fair thing to say. Why are they? Why do they make? And let's talk about that in a moment, because
would they call their assisted driving system B spec?
Yeah, I mean, that would be great. But you're talking about a nomenclature that, as you mentioned, might remind people of a video game. Video games remind people of entertainment, of fun, of excitement, and to offer something that may not deliver on those promises, that's a bizarre, that's a paradigm shift, I suppose, if we're going to use buzzwords.
Anything else you want to say about this vehicle before we move on?
It has so much potential. I don't know why they can miss the mark so hard.
Well, I mean, they've had a lot of practice. It is Acura.
You're so mean. But what I'm saying is, lately they delivered that Integra, which is pretty good.
One good vehicle.
The Type S version of that, which is excellent. And from what I've been reading, the ADX seems to be fairly good as well. Although I will say ADX is aiming low with budget-oriented luxury cars, and you just have to keep up in that class.
It's a low bar to hurt. It's a low bar.
Exactly.
Yeah.
What are you driving? What's the scoop?
So speaking of bars to hurdle, I got back into Ranger. This is a little bit of an odd situation. I thought I was booking a 2025 model year Ranger, and
yeah,
it is March of 2025. And when I got home, I realized it was a 2024 model. So there are no differences between 2024 and 2025, especially for the XLT model that I drove. The primary differences are just color choices. So in terms of functionality, there's not really anything there's nothing to report. So we could talk about this as if it's a 2025. But the reason I booked this vehicle is because if you recall, earlier in the year, I drove a pre-production 2024 Ranger Raptor. Mm-hmm. And that vehicle came with a 405 horsepower turbocharged 6-cylinder engine. Up until 2024, the Ranger had only been available with a Turbo 4. 2.3 liter engine, 270 horsepower. It was pretty good, but this was the global Ranger. It was a vehicle that had been pulled from another market. The interior was okay, but not great. The drivetrain was fine. Everything about it was fine. It had fallen behind. I shouldn't say fallen behind, because it was due for a redesign. Let's go with that. And 2024 brought that redesign. And I talked about with the Ranger Raptor that I like the interior. It's more functional. It's nicer. I wasn't so happy with the price. What I didn't like about the Ranger Raptor was the performance. I didn't really feel like 405 horsepower were present and accounted for. It was quick, but I had a lot of traction limitations because of the tires that were on it. I found they weren't very good on snowy surfaces. Even though they were, 3-peak mountain snowflake rated were they KO3s? I can't remember. Something like that. Some very aggressive all-terrain tire. And the truck felt a little bit bigger than I wanted it to. So I wanted to drive something that was more normal, like most people are going to buy, and what's more affordable. So I booked this XLT, which is like a mid-tier trim level. Mm-hmm. And it has the optional V6 that's also available with the Ranger this year. So you can get the Turbo 4, you can get the crazy Turbo 6 that comes with the Raptor, or you can get this motor. It's a 2.7, and it has 315 horsepower. That's a pretty big step up over the Turbo 4, which is 270 horses, and it only costs you $2,000 US. And actually in Canada, I think it might even be cheaper. No, sorry, it is cheaper because it's essentially the same amount of money in Canadian dollars. So you can add that to any 4-wheel drive version of the Ranger, from what I understand. I would highly recommend doing that after my time with the vehicle, because this just felt like a much better application of a turbocharged V6 for a midsize pickup. I didn't have to worry. I didn't have that feeling that the truck was straining all the time, or that it was, I don't know, just this truck over-delivered, whereas I think the Raptor under-delivered. And I started looking at some test results. Car and Driver put them side by side, the XLT with the Turbo 6 and the Ranger with the ostensibly more powerful Turbo 6. Mm-hmm. And in 0 to 60, the XLT does 5.6 seconds. And the Raptor, which has 100 horsepower or more, does 5.3. Does that seem problematic to you, Sammy?
Yeah, it feels like a performance car is not delivering the performance that might be on the name of it, right?
Yeah, and even the Raptor's engine, it's not just more powerful, but it's also larger. Like, it's a 3-liter turbo versus a 2.7. So you figure there's an innate torque advantage there as well. My theory is twofold. I think the Ranger's suspension and whatnot is heavier than that in the XLT, and it has more features, whereas the XLT is kind of, like I said, mid-tier, so it's not loaded with stuff. And then there's the tires. Those big off-road tires are going to be a demultiplier on your gearing. So Ford has to balance out the fact they have a very tall sidewall with a rear gear that will give them enough grunt to go up hills off-road, but not totally murder their fuel mileage. And I think it's maybe it's a bargain that you can't really make in a truck like this.
Okay. So that is an impressive element. I wanted to tell you, before the podcast, I was saying that the gearing might play a part here, but Ben didn't really like that.
Sammy just kept saying gearing over and over and over.
What is the transmission that they've offered in this thing? It's a 9-speed, isn't it?
I don't know if it's a 9-speed or a 10-speed. I assumed it was the 10-speed. I can double check on that. It's the same. I want to say it's the same transmission as the Turbo 4. Mm-hmm. And I really think that the 10-speed is the only thing you can get in trucks these days, but let me double check.
Okay. And then otherwise...
It is the 10-speed.
That's really interesting.
And the other thing about this truck, like I said, XLT, mid-range tier, it didn't have automatic 4-wheel drive. So you were either in 4-wheel high or you were in 4-wheel low when you were out of 2-wheel. So you had to be mindful of whether you were driving on a dry surface or not, because it's not good for a 4-wheel drive system. And you'll also get some cribbing when you try to turn corners at low speeds when it's dry, if the wheels can't slip. I actually had a weird thing happen where I had it in 4-wheel drive in a parking lot that was very slippery, and this truck was also on an all-terrain, all-season tire, just not as aggressive as what you would find on a Ranger Raptor. So because the parking lot was slippery, I had it in 4-wheel drive at low speeds, and I got a steering error where the steering assist actually cut out, and I got a steering error box on the screen in front of me that was get this serviced, and then I did an ignition cycle and it went away. So that was something, I didn't have that problem with the pre-production Raptor, with this production truck. But I very impressed with this motor. I liked it a lot. Fuel mileage is it's it's what you're going to get with any mid-sized truck. The 4-cylinder does better. I did some truck stuff with it. I hauled some gravel. It did fine. It was very light load. The interior is much nicer than the previous generation Ranger was, especially in terms of detail. It's still, it's a basic Ranger. It does truck stuff. That's fine. But you have actual dials and controls that you can use while your hands have gloves on them and stuff. I found that the Ford infotainment screen was relatively simple to use. The only area where it kind of falls down is my truck had this gauge cluster with obviously an LCD screen, and then on either side there was the fuel gauge and then the temperature gauge for the water temperature, and they were where it's kind of like there's a black background and then they scratch out like a gauge so the light shines through it. Yeah. Got little bars beside it that go up and down to show you. It had that, and it looks cheap. It looks really cheap. And it looks even cheaper when it's contrasted against the LCD screen, because the LCD screen also has similar looking gauges. You can have these 3 bar gauges where 2 of them are the ones I just described, and then there's one for oil temperature on the screen. That, looks almost completely different font wise, but it's the same general structure, and it's just what were you guys thinking? Oh
yeah, we love redundant gauges in trucks.
It's not even so much redundant. It's just I feel like there was no cohesive design. I think kind of the XLT probably suffers because it's that mid trim where you're not getting the basic look and you're not getting the best look. You're getting a mix of the two. And that really shows that you're getting a mix. You see the difference.
Yeah. Tell me more about this truck though, in particular, because to me, there's a part about the Ranger that is high end, not high end, but is among the best in its class. Is that still the case?
I didn't think the previous truck was among the best in its class.
No, not the previous one. The last gen was not good.
Have you driven this generation Ranger?
No.
I feel like it's better than the Tacoma because of those problems I had with do you remember the issues I
Yes.
had with the hybrid?
And it seems like you're not the only one with those issues.
Yeah.
That's what I'm trying to say, is that the Tacoma is losing its grip a little bit.
I still feel like the Colorado and the Canyon are really good. And I feel like the Nissan Frontier is like design forward from the outside, but is pretty lackluster from behind the wheel. I would put the Ranger between the GM and the Nissan, and I would put probably the Tacoma on the same level as the Nissan until they get things figured out. And as I haven't driven the special editions of the Tacoma, like the Trail Hunter and all this stuff, like $80,000 Tacoma that's out there. So maybe those are great. But
I mean, even in that case, the pricing of those trucks.
Yeah, like as a truck, like I wasn't super impressed. The Ranger starts at $43 US for the XLT that I drove. And then you add like another $2,000 for the V6. In Canada, it's surprisingly similar. $46,000 is the base for the XLT. My truck had $10,000 worth of options. Most of that was something called even more so than the V6, there was something called the Advanced Towing Package and Tech Package. And it came with like, I think a navigation system, also the trailer backing up assist, and like a whole bunch of towing related things like checklists, and I think a lighting test. I'm not sure about that, but you can add different trailer profiles, and there's like a camera to help you when you're backing up with the trailer, all sorts of stuff like that. That was like $3,500. So that's more than $1,000 more than the V6. So I hope that's not the only way you can get a tow package, because I think you could tow with this truck without all the doodads and it would just do just fine. Mm-hmm. But in any case, like literally half of the $10,000 in options was V6 and towing package.
So then the obvious final question is, would you recommend this Ranger XLT?
I think so. I still think $50,000 is a lot of money to spend for a mid-sized truck. You're pretty close to F-150 territory in the States, in any case, at that point. Not
just any F-150, like a decent F-150 too, right?
I don't know. I haven't looked at F-150 pricing in a while. I can look right now just to get a feel for it. But when that's the case, whenever you have a mid-sized truck that butts up against an F-Series truck or a Silverado or something, I think it really becomes a question of lifestyle, as we've said before. Like if you live in a city, this truck is way, way, way easier to live with than any full-size pickup. Full-size pickups are a problem in a tight environment, and don't let anyone tell you anything otherwise. Like this is a truck where if you don't have a ton of space to park, you don't have a ton of space to drive on your commute, but you still need to do truck stuff like towing specifically, I think then it makes sense to choose over an F-Series. The bed is quite small, at least on this four-door. They're all four-door, but at least on the model I had, you can't put a ton of stuff in there. So it's primarily, I think, a towing option for people. If you're hauling stuff, you might need the bigger bed of the full-size truck. You know, it's the Ford. The base F-150 starts at $37 US, but an STX is $44,000 and an XLT is $47,000. And right around there, like in between those two trucks, is a Ranger. At least the version of the Ranger, the XLT version of the Ranger. The base model, I think, is like 32 or something.
Yeah.
With the 4
Well, I think you're right. If people are looking for a truck and they don't, if they live in a more suburban or rural area, anytime the budget is getting closer to one of those full-size trucks, you really have to consider them. I would probably put the Edge over to those. They come with their own different drawbacks. I think fuel economy in particular isn't very good on those bigger trucks. But if space is a concern of yours, then that's the only way these smaller trucks make more sense.
Yeah, I feel like it's important to point out that you're not going to get good fuel mileage on any truck that's not a diesel, a hybrid, or an electric vehicle. Like it's just they're not efficient vehicles because of their size, their lack of aerodynamics, and their weight. Yeah, there's really no way around that. So thinking you'll get a mid-sized truck that's going to vastly outperform a full-size truck at the fuel pump, it won't. It might be a bit better, but it's not going to be dramatic. You'd really have to go down to a Maverick. And even at the Maverick, you'd really want to get the hybrid because the EcoBoost one is good for what it is, but it's got middling fuel efficiency. Like you won't be disappointed, but you're not going to be impressed.
The other thing, though, is that to me, looking at the numbers alone, mid-sized trucks, in terms of towing capability, seem really really capable. I mean, I don't know how many people really go to the edge of what a full size truck is offering, but that usually seems like overkill to me. And I think that a mid-sized truck offers enough towing.
What numbers are you seeing for towing?
Oh, I haven't done it in a little while.
Oh, I thought you were looking at it right now.
No, not right now. Why? What do you have? Don't you have
the V6? It comes with 7,500.
9? Isn't it 9?
No, it's 7,500 pounds. I just got a request to book the RHO version of the Ram, which is I guess it's the replacement for the TRX. Obviously, a very big vehicle with like 500 and something horsepower, 540, I think. It has a tow rating of like 8,800 pounds. So this is a massive truck with a very, very small delta between the tow rating. So it's the difference is not as big as you think, and it's as with any vehicle.
75, yes, 75. Sorry, yep, and then 88 on the RHO.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. So to continue that thought, towing near the limit with any vehicle is never a good experience.
That's right.
So you're not going to want to go up to 7,500. But again, with the Ram, like the experience I had last year when I was towing with it, you can't really go up to 8,500, 8,800 either, because you have to consider tongue weight, you have to consider the cargo you're carrying, you have to consider your passengers. Like it really does bring things down to like a 7,000 pound level.
Great point. Okay. But that's what I'm trying to get at is like, if you want something that can tow for the cheapest budget you've got, this might be one of the other reasons to pick up a mid-size versus a full size. Sure. Then again, an RHO is pricey. Like it's
but I would just use it as an example.
Really.
Like the Ram Limited, it's the same thing. It's because they might be larger vehicles, which makes you think they can tow more. But all of the equipment and the size of these vehicles is eating into the gross vehicle weight rating.
That's right.
So the higher the trim level you have, the more doors it has, like all that stuff that's in there, that's going to lower your tow rating. So it might be a huge truck, but you might only be able to tow 7,000 pounds.
Yeah, I don't know. Trucks are a tricky thing when it comes to recommending them, because they do really depend on whether or not they're going to be used for work or just an everyday vehicle.
Yeah, I can't recommend any pickup as a commuter. Like, forget it. Don't do it. It doesn't make sense. If you do need a truck from time to time, rent one from Home Depot for like $20. Literally, it's a better choice. And then get something that's not going to eat you alive at the fuel pump and that's going to be easier to park. If you're towing every weekend, it's obviously a different story.
Yeah, exactly. Anything else you want to talk about?
I don't think so. I think that kind of sizes up where I was at mentally with the Ranger.
Are you ready to close the door on episode 400 here?
Oh, it's already closed. I'm looking at it over my shoulder.
Okay. You didn't tell me. We have to say some things about it. I
slammed it, Sammy. You should have heard it.
No. If you want to listen to approximately 399 other episodes of our podcast, I recommend you head on over to our website, unnamedautomotivepodcast.com. While you're there, you'll see our previous episodes. You'll find out ways to subscribe to our podcast using a bunch of buttons at the top, or if you really want to, you can just search for us in your podcast client. In addition to that, this is the part that I really like about our website. You can contact us. There's a little form there. You fill it out. It lands right in our inbox. Me and Ben get to talk about it. And then if you bring up a question, we get to talk about it on the next episode that we get to record, which is always good. I recommend anybody. You have any question on your mind about what's going on in the automotive industry, just hit us up. We love to talk. So obviously we have 16 days worth of us talking about cars. What's another couple of minutes to answer your question? Of course, nothing.
And you can find us also on the social medias. Did you mention that, Sammy?
No, and that's another way to get in touch with us. You can head on over to Instagram. Ben is at Hunting Benjamin. You can find me at Sammy_ha, like you're laughing. And what else do we got to talk about? There's also the old-fashioned way of getting in touch with us. It's Benjamin at BenjaminHunting.com.
And Sammy, what are you going to be driving and talking about for next week's 401st episode?
I am dreading next week's car because it's a Honda HR-V. This is a car that I am not looking forward to driving.
You actually trash-talked this car at the beginning of the episode.
Yeah, I don't want to talk about this. So this is a vehicle that, I don't know, man. They could have done things so much better.
Maybe we'll just do a lightning round. We haven't done one of those in a while. I'm going to be driving the Mini Cooper Countryman S, all for electric. I'm not sure those words are accurate. I'm not sure I got the order right.
Okay, great. Well, hopefully you figure out by next week's episode.
I hope so too.
And obviously the SEO will really be important there.
Oh yeah. Consonants and vowels. Thank you for listening, everybody.
Thank you, everyone. And here's to another 400 episodes.
Bye.
Bye.